Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Spiritual Handyman, where we are putting spiritual tools into the hands of people that need them. Today, I'm very excited to be talking to Dr. Matt Barnes, and he is an author and scholar. He's also an acupuncturist and works with Chinese medicine, among many other things that he has dabbled in and learned in his journey. Today, we're going to be talking about the Hermetica and the Hermetic principles and the Cabal Eon, reaching all the way back to the days of Hermes Trismegistus. So this is a subject that is near and dear to me, and really excited to have another scholar on the show that has deeply studied the teachings of Hermes and the things that followed. Remind everybody that we are available on YouTube for free, also at thespiritualhandyman.com. And we are now on Spotify, so you can catch us in all different places. You can listen to the show audio, or you can check it out. The video posts every Thursday at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So let's jump into this week's episode. Matt, please tell the folks a little bit about yourself. Thanks so much for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Like you said, I've studied Chinese medicine, chiropractic, acupuncture, things like that. I actually got a degree in chemistry and biochemistry. Decided I didn't want to work in a lab, and that's what got me into chiropractic and acupuncture. And just a little bit about what got me on this path. When I went to college, it was such a big transition for me from high school. In high school, I wasn't the greatest athlete in the world, but I was an athlete. I wasn't the most popular guy, but I was popular-ish, I guess. And then when I got into college, I was nobody. I was a number, you know. And about halfway through, most of my friends were engineers, and they all started doing projects. So they'd stay up all night long doing their projects, sleep during the day, and that was the opposite of me. So I never saw them anymore. Well, I ended up moving into an apartment complex, and there was a laundromat across, and that's where I did my laundry every week. And there was a used bookstore right beside it. And I'd go to this used bookstore, and they had this whole shelf of spiritual books. And I had always been interested in spirituality, but back then we didn't have the internet or anything like that. So I had a really hard time getting any information. Well, I started going to this used bookstore. I'd get a book and then go do my laundry. And that's when it all, started for me. The first book I ever read was Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I don't know. When I read it, it was like I wasn't learning. I was remembering something. I don't know how to explain it, but that just lit a fire under me. I mean, I read all of his books and made note cards and flashcards, and every day I would try to live a principle that, from the book. Then Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Illusions by Richard Bach. They had the Tao Te Ching. They had Buddhist books. They had just about everything I could get my hands on. And I don't know. It was like coming home for me. And for the last 30 years or so, I've been absorbed into this, understanding, and read and reread a lot of those books. What got me into writing my own books was I had a friend that I live in the Deep South. It's a very religious area. Very strictly, I don't know exactly how I want to say, but I had a friend whose parents were very religious, and it affected her in a bad way. And she wanted to learn about other religions, but wasn't allowed to, and other spirituality, but wasn't allowed to. That wasn't acceptable around here. And, I got with her, and I said, well, I can show you a few things if you want. And she was interested, so I gave her the Tao Te Ching. I mean, it's just such a simple, non-denominational book. I thought this would be a great introduction to it. She read the first chapter, came back and said, I don't understand a word of it. And I thought, it's such a simple book. I didn't understand. I took the book from her and read it, the first chapter, and, she was right. It was so poetic, and using the language of that time and the concepts of that time And I said, well, here's in my, the Tao Te Ching is 81 chapters. They're very short. They're like one, maybe 2 pages at a time. I read the first chapter and I said, this is what I think, big picture, this chapter said. And it rung a bell with her. And she got really excited about it. So I wrote that chapter down for that night and made it, as simple as I could. She started reading it before bed every night. I thought, well, shoot, let's do chapter 2. We ended up doing all 81 chapters. It was mostly written for her. Plain English, something somebody in my area would understand. And I got through and I said, it's easy to publish now with Kindle. So I just put it on there. Maybe there's other people that wanted to know about other religions that weren't so dogmatic, and, spirituality that wasn't so dogmatic. And then I started thinking, well, what other books might she like? What other teachings might I be able to get to her? And that's when I started writing Hermetica, Kybalion, Emerald Tablet, that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much where I came from. And most of the books I write are meant for that. It's a big picture. It's for people that aren't that aren't already familiar with a lot of this stuff for the most part.
Thank you for sharing the details of your journey. That really gives an excellent understanding of why you got into and how you got into those pieces. And having been in the Deep South myself, I graduated high school in Montgomery, Alabama. I understand some of the restricted beliefs that exist in that area, and not with like you said, being careful about how you say it. There's just spirituality just really isn't embraced. So making it accessible to people is really powerful. Now, I want to be clear, and I'm sure in parts of this you'll agree with me, Matt, that there's nothing wrong with religion itself.
Right, exactly.
It all kind of has the same basic premises, right?
Right.
Yeah, when you break it all down, it kind of is all the same thing, just said in different ways and prioritized differently.
Right. And have you ever heard the parable with the blind kids and the elephant?
No.
Okay, so a bunch of blind kids have never had any contact with an elephant before. So a teacher puts them all around the elephant, reach out your hand, and they say, well, what is an elephant to you? And the first kid said, well, it's a big long trunk. And the second one said, no, it's a big floppy ear. The third one said, no, it's a big old belly. The next one said, I think it's a big leg. Then the last one says, no, it's a thin tail, little short, thin, wiry tail. The point is that each kid could only describe what it was experiencing in the perception it had, the limited perception of what they were looking at. Religion's been described the same way. All the religions through all the time periods have gotten the small glimpse at something that's bigger than us that we don't understand. And they describe it the best way they can, just like a blind kid touching an elephant in one spot or another. So, I think they're all describing the same things. The only problem I ever have is when somebody decides that their perception is the only perception that's allowed. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's, when I say restrictive, that's what I mean by that, is that it's very obligatory, right? You believe this or you're not one of us kind of thing. And
exactly.
And even in our own truth, our truth is different, even if we agree. Because we're coming from our collective experience in our own place, right? So And I also like that you were really driven to make the information accessible in a way that anybody could digest it. And that's a spectacular gift, not only to be able to do it, but to actually take action and put it out there in that kind of way. And you've done that with a number of different subjects, not just spiritual stuff. You've also got some investing books that are along the same lines. The one that really piqued my interest first was the Kybalion, the Kybalion 101. But that comes kind of after the Hermetica 101. Right. So tell us what drove you to decide to write the Hermetica 101. What did you see there that needed to be out in the world?
Well, again, it was mostly my friend that was wanting to be exposed to other teachings. And again, she'd come from such a restrictive belief system where she wasn't allowed. Um, and what I found so interesting about the teachings of Hermes is that scholars are they debate a bit on whether, some of the scholars actually believe that Hermes was possibly Abraham, of the Christian religion, and that he actually started two different religions, that his teachings actually grew into Western and Eastern kind of philosophies. And I just thought that was so interesting and something that she would get an understanding out of, that we're looking at, that people around the world since the beginning of time have asked these questions. Who are we? What is this all about? Where do we go after? All that kind of stuff. And wanted to show her something that was inclusive, not exclusive, if that makes sense. And so much of the Hermetica, well, mostly the Hermetica, so much of those teachings have shown up in other religions, showing that it's kind of the foundation where a lot of stuff came out. The saying that the world was created by the word of God, and the Trinity and all this kind of stuff. A lot of religions have kind of grown out of the Hermetica, and I wanted her to see the inclusivity of it, not so much that I wanted her to get out of the exclusivity beliefs that she had grown up with, if that makes any sense.
It does. It makes perfect sense. And my understanding of the teachings of Hermes, which is the Hermetica in general,
Right.
is that it's kind of the foundation for astrology, alchemy,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
the whole new age, what we call now the new age
Right.
movement, is
Right.
really just getting back to the foundation of a
Right.
lot of philosophies. And
Right.
the one of the things that I find really interesting, and I just want to get your take on this,
Okay.
is there's the question of Hermes and Thoth and the Emerald Tablets and
Right.
the Kybalion. I mean, the Kybalion really surfaced in the early 1900s,
Later.
but
Yeah.
1930s, right? But written by the
Right.
three initiates. But
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
compilation of the Hermetic teachings, kind of
Right.
funneled down a little bit, but still
Right. Right.
in 1900s language, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So for you, what is your belief on how the progression is, or is that still up in the air for you? Because when I started studying, looking at Hermes, because I kept hearing the name in my head, I actually ended up looking at the Greek version, which
Right.
really
Right.
didn't make sense. Like, this doesn't sound like the guy who
Right.
built all this other stuff. But when I got back to Hermes Trismegistus, the Thrice Great, that really rung true to me. So
Right.
what's your understanding of the progression and where all that really came from?
I'm going to answer this by going a little bit into Zen. Have you studied much about Zen?
Not personally, no.
Yeah. Well, when Buddhism first hit China, it became known as Chan, apostrophe A-N. They took Buddhism and made it and combined it with Taoism and made it their own thing. So Buddha in India was this skinny guy meditating, and in China he turned into this big fat old happy guy, right? Then when Zen went into Japan, I mean, when Chan went to Japan, that was basically Buddhism to Chinese Chan into Japan, and it became Zen. I feel like it's the same thing with, you have the Egyptian Hermes, and then the teaching spread to another culture, to the Greek culture, and they just kind of absorbed it and put it in their own words and kind of put their own flair to it. It was quite a bit different to me than the original Egyptian, but to me that's how it is. I think each culture just absorbs these universal ideas, makes it their own, makes it into their own thing, and it changes, although it still usually has that seed that it started with. Is that kind of what you were asking?
That does answer part of the question.
Okay.
I guess I was thinking more of the practical sense of, is there a
Okay.
was Hermes a real guy, or was he
Oh,
deified as Thoth? Were the Emerald
right,
Tablets before or after him? And
right. I have no idea. Yeah,
And that's kind of where I'm at too, to be honest, is the chronology of it just is kind of all over the place. It's almost
it
as if
is.
there's no real way to know for sure.
In my opinion, there is no real. I mean, it happened so long ago. How are you going to know for sure? It's
Hmm.
just like Taoism. You know, the Tao Te Ching was attributed to Lao Tzu. Later scholars said, I don't think so. I mean, I think these were his teachings, but he had all these students that I think they wrote down their own ideas. But how do you know for sure? It's just so long ago. Even the scholars that study this thing debate over it. And to me, it doesn't matter if it works for you. If it's a truth for you, then it just doesn't matter to
I,
me.
I I agree with that conclusion. Our human mind likes to put dimension on things and
Right.
to understand the source of things. And when we learn to let go of that, that's something I learned in my 30s. I don't need to know everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
being okay
Yeah.
with that makes all my relationships better, quite
Oh,
honestly.
yeah. Yeah.
So something just occurred to me, Matt, while you were explaining that part of it, is that even with Hermes, the story that comes out, and it makes sense
Right.
because it's how it's happened to so many, is that he had these revelations and these understandings during
Right.
meditation, which
Right.
really which really means that the information sort of came from the universe, right?
Right.
The
Right.
universal knowledge. So it's almost as if it's always been there, and that he was
Yeah.
more of a channel for the information.
Right. Right. And so many of the guys that we study are like that. You had Hermes, you had Jesus, what is it, 30 days and 30 nights out in the desert. Buddha was 40 days and 40 nights under the Lodi tree. Socrates, same thing. Somebody said they saw him staring into the heavens and he got enthralled with something, didn't move till the morning. And when he came in, that's when he said he understood things. Even Muhammad, he was in a cave and had visions. They all, it seems to be this common denominator that when your mind gets quiet, things just start getting in.
Things start to make a lot more sense that way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that is the most challenging that we put in the front, is it's hard to get our minds quiet and hard to
Yeah.
get by the chatter. But
Right.
it takes a little bit of time and some consciousness, and even a lack of consciousness in some
Right.
cases,
Right.
to just get there. And
Right.
anything you do that gets you there is pretty fabulous, I would say. So
Right. Right.
so when we talk about Hermetica, and the Hermetic teachings and the principles, most specifically those that are presented in the Cabal Eon, and what was the first one of those 7 principles that you personally connected with? What made sense to you first?
Well, with the Kybalion, they have that saying, as above, so below, as within, so without. Right? We've heard that over and over and again. And I don't know. One day I just had the realization that the sun is like the nucleus of an atom and the planets are like electrons. And it was one of those things. I mean, everything goes into everybody a little different. But when I realized that, when I really realized that, I don't know. It was one of those small awakenings, whatever you want to call them, where all of a sudden things just started clicking together for me, and I don't know. That's really where I got started, and with my study in biochemistry and chemistry, and you start looking at things that's smaller and smaller and smaller, and then you look out and you see that our solar system is like an atom. Well, what is it forming? How many solar systems are out there? Our solar system is part of the Milky Way galaxy. Is that some kind of tissue for a bigger entity that we don't even understand? Or, all of that started hidden, and it just kind of blew my mind for a while. And then it sunk in, if that makes any sense.
Hmm. Absolutely, it does. It does. And as I was reading through the principles, everything is mind, being the first
Right,
principle, the universe is mental, was
right,
was interesting, and it made sense. But it was farther down in the list that I really got the hit, like what you're talking about.
okay. Well,
And for me, it was the rhythm and
yeah,
the idea of the pendulum, and
right,
the piece that the 3 initiates shared, that those that have learned to work with the rhythm have
Right.
adjusted their experience so they keep the pendulum more on one side. They're still
Right.
the same possible swing, but they
Right.
have figured out how to keep it over here for
Right.
extended periods. And
Right.
that to me made sense, because that's kind of like happy and sad, or depressed
Yeah.
and joyful, right? You can
Yeah.
choose to be on one side or the other, but you have
Right.
to be
Right.
mindful and present with that.
And it's exhausting at first anyway. Your mind's a muscle, you know.
Yeah.
It takes a while for it to get where you can hold it where you want it. You know, like holding a tune on a guitar, holding that same tune, holding that same vibration. It just takes a lot of work at first until it becomes a habit, you know. And I think we're all, I mean, I'm still working on it. I'm aware of it now, but I'm still working on it, you know.
And that, I think, is one of the tools that the Cabal Eon delivered for me, and what the Hermetic teachings have shown me, is that it is about a mindfulness. And
Right.
there is a lot to be said for your mindset. And then
Right.
when you understand that everything comes from there,
Right.
that
Your
it
perception comes exactly from there, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. Well, and then the actions that you take, the things you do to create your
Right.
experience,
Right.
suddenly have a different type of energy to them, because you
Right.
can very deliberately make your way through your life.
Right. Right.
One
Yeah.
of the things I thought also was really interesting that was shared in the teachings, the Hermetica, and again, specifically the Kybalion, is that alchemy is really the adjustment of our environment. And it
Right.
has often been touted as turning lead into gold.
Right. Right.
but
Right.
actually it's the transference and transmutation of mental and physical everything, really.
Right. Right.
Does that sound accurate to you?
Yeah. It's the transformation of a lower level consciousness into a higher level consciousness. And they equated that with gold. In a lot of religions, they've equated heaven with streets of gold, paved with gold, you know, that kind of thing. And so, you know, alchemy alluded to turning lead into gold, but you know, it's believed by the more inner circles that what they're talking about is actually turning a dull person, a person with a lower level consciousness, raising the consciousness to higher and higher levels. It's just like in Islam, you know, in the jihad, you know, the holy battle, you know, the on the more inner circles, the people that claim to have the inner circle knowledge say it's not an external holy war, it's the holy war in you. It's an internal jihad. You know, Islam believes you're here to fight that jihad, that holy war, and they say yes, you are, but it's not with other people. It's inside yourself. It's the light and the dark. You know, again, transmutating from dark into light, from lead into gold.
And I think that's the miss in a lot of cases, that is created by existing as an individual in a third dimensional reality,
Right,
is that we get this idea that what we're battling is outside of us.
right. When it's all in there, it's
And
all inside.
and
Yeah,
I tell that to people a lot. When I speak, I talk about it. When I work with clients, I share that with them, is that no matter what your journey looks like, it's going to send you within. I used to say, if
yeah.
on your spiritual journey, you're going to have to
Right,
look within, but it
right,
really is, no matter what path, quote, you're on, uh,
right,
to really get into a place of happiness and joy and consistency. It really is about looking within yourself and satisfying
right.
those things internally.
Yeah. Just one input on that. Years ago, I was having trouble with my father-in-law. He he wasn't very supportive of his daughter or son-in-law when we first opened up our clinic. And he was kind of gruff, and he was an alcoholic, and we just had a really bad relationship. And one day, I mean, I thought I was getting an ulcer over dealing with this guy, you know. And one day I just said, you know what, I have to change how I think of him. And I just started looking at him and realizing I love him. He may upset me, but I love him. He's a good guy. He's just fighting his own battles that I don't even know about. And I'm gonna tell you, as soon as I did that, I mean, I never told him I did that, but our relationship changed as soon as I did it. So you know, it does. I don't know. There's an energy you give out, and you know, it just latches onto others, and you can change their vibration level with your own, if that makes sense. You know, I don't want to put things too esoteric for people out there, but you know, you know, laughter is contagious, love is contagious, so is hate. You know, so it may have been my own feelings towards him that was making him feel that way towards me, and when I changed how I felt towards him, everything changed.
To be truly candid and transparent with you, Matt, I am in a very similar situation and
Yeah.
have recently recognized, even just in the last few days, and remembered that the things that maybe I don't like that I see in someone else are the things about me that I
Right.
might want to take a look at.
Right.
so
Right.
so
Right.
and it's actually helped me understand, even as hard as the hit was, when it, you know, you hit yourself with that spiritual brick in the face
Right.
and you go, who threw that?
Right.
Oh, I threw that. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
sometimes you have to accept and be okay with our imperfections and realize, all right, there really is something I can learn from this, and it's actually going to make it better for me and for them, and
Right. Right.
for all of those we're interacting with. It just makes for a better situation. And for me, the Hermetic principles really apply in so many cases in so many different ways. And
Right.
the reason I had asked you about which one stood out to you is because
Right.
you really only have to grab a hold of one of them to get
Right.
started, right?
Right.
And it's not
Right.
necessarily number one. It could be
Right.
four or five or
Right.
whatever. But there's so many possibilities, and grabbing onto just one of those principles can immediately adjust your life. It can change things in an instant.
Right.
And
Right.
then the understanding starts to broaden.
Right. Right. And you know, like the friend I wrote the original, I wrote the Tao Te Ching for her originally, and then got into the Hermetic teachings. And you know, her relationship with her parents is very interesting, because at first, I mean, they just keep pressuring her to go back to her church. And she would cry and she couldn't go, and she would avoid her parents, and they would write her these letters about how she was not going to heaven if she didn't get back into the church, you know, that kind of thing. But over time, she's matured in the idea that it's okay that they have their own beliefs, and it's okay that they don't accept hers. She still accepts theirs. And now, I mean, she even went to church with them a couple months ago and was able to do it. I mean, before she literally was emotionally unable to do that. Now she was okay to go and pray with them and be okay that it's not her thing, but it's theirs, and she's okay to be with them. You
That's beautiful that you were able to help someone come to terms with what it is for them and hand it over in a way that they can digest it for themselves. And I think there's tremendous power in that. I would make the suggestion to anyone out there interested in Dr. Matthew Barnes's information today that you take an opportunity to look at the books that he has available. They are on Amazon. I know as soon as I started reading the first one, I just went ahead and bought the three. It started with the Kybalion 101, and then right to Hermetica, and the next one will be the Emerald Tablets.
know.
So really enjoy your writing and how things are so matter of fact and just delivered in a clean and clear, concise way. Putting that out there for people means that you're putting tools that are ancient into modern hands. And I find that to be a very rewarding and beautiful thing that you're offering.
Thank you. I'm trying.
You're doing a fantastic job, my man. So I know you have a website where people can learn a little more about you and all the different books that you have. Would you share that with our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, that's www.matthewbarnes-101.com. Matthewbarnes-101.com.
And of course, they can get to your list of books there, learn a little bit about you, and
Right.
also hop on Amazon or whatever bookstore they use
Right.
to acquire the different things that you've penned and subject and put out into the world. So thank you so much for doing that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I really appreciate you taking the time today to share your experience and your thoughts and philosophies with the folks in our community. So on behalf of the Spiritual Handyman folks, we say thank you for joining us for this episode.
I thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, man.
Well, I also wanted to just interject real quick that this is episode 42. And
Wow.
if you're a fan of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that
Yeah.
means that this episode is the answer to everything.
Oh, okay. I've
If
read
you,
Hitchhiker's Guide. I
if
didn't
you,
realize that was the number, though.
yeah, well, that was the number the computer came up with at the end,
Okay,
right?
that's right.
The
That's
answer
right.
to everything in the universe. Why are we here? Was 42.
There you
So
go.
totally
Yeah.
appropriate that it landed this way. So Matt, thanks once
Awesome.
again.
Yeah.
On behalf of the Spiritual Handyman community, we appreciate what you're putting out there. And everybody, thanks for listening and for watching. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and to be a part of the community. Leave your comments and feedback. We love to hear from you. And please share any of this information with other people that you think might benefit, whether it's from this episode or any others. So we will see you folks in the next episode.
The Spiritual Handyman, bringing spiritual tools to the hands of the people who need them. Sponsored by the Eagle Heart Foundation. The Eagle Heart Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that brings charitable contributions and educational enhancements to the people. So how can you be a part of the Spiritual Handyman and the Eagle Heart Foundation? The Triple Win Situation. This book was written by Granddaughter Crow, and half of the proceeds go to the Eagle Heart Foundation, which in turn sponsors the Spiritual Handyman. How to get it one? It's on Amazon and Kindle for only $9.99. So we are here to bring tools to you. Thank you so much, Spiritual Handyman. We believe in what you do.